Welcome back, everyone. We got some stuffs today. We have a steering stabilizer that I purchased from Umeå Offroad in Sweden. Link will be in the description. This specific one is of the brand Rancho. And I heard some really good stuff about putting steering stabilizers on the Jimny, especially if you have them lifted and if you're running bigger tires. Putting a steering stabilizer on them is supposed to do quite a lot for the handling. That got me curious, so I want to figure out how it works and if it improves the handling improves the handling a lot. That's also a very good opportunity for me to actually do an installation video on how you install these steering stabilizers for your Suzuki Jimny. This is all the items you found in the kit. Of course, you have the shock. It's a Rancho shock, and the logo Ranger is on it. It also comes with a sticker. The sticker is not shown here because I left it inside. You have this protection for the shock, some hardware for the shock, and then you have 3 different mounting brackets, a zip tie, and some mounting hardware. This is how it's done. This one is put on the steering rod with this one attached. And between here you have the bushings and the mounting hardware that comes. And then you take these 2 ones and attach like this around the steering rod. On the other side you have these 2 brackets, and I think that these ones goes through the frame, one on each side that is sandwiching them, and then you put the other side of your steering stabilizer in this, and of course also with the bushings and the stuffs that comes. Now it's time to go on with the installation and see if this is right. The first thing I will do is to put a bracket like this. This side is facing upwards and towards the right wheel of the vehicle, and it's attached like this. This is how it goes on. The U-clamp goes around the steering rod and the bracket goes in. Then you put the brakes on and the locking nut. At this point, I'm not going to tighten it down. I'm just going to put it there loosely so that I could adjust everything later. And the other U-clamp goes on in the same way with the brakes and the nuts. The preferred way to do this is to put the nuts upwards, because then they are more protected from the elements. Here we got it attached on the steering rod quite loosely. Next thing we're going to turn our attention to goes over here to the left, up here in the frame rail. There's only 2 bolts left, and those are used for this bracket. I will keep this long side facing away from the wheel, because there might be a risk that the wheel, when turning full to the right, that the wheel might hit them if you put them on the other side. I'm going to put this one on the outside, so it will go like this. I got both of the bolts attached on it, and I'm going to attach this from the opposite side on the right side of this hole. Up here there is a coolant hose that you might need to put some sort of protection on, and just make sure that it doesn't interfere with the bolts. So I'm lifting up the coolant hose, and then let's see if it goes through. I don't really see what I'm doing now. goes like this. And then I'm adjusting the rubber protection that I got on the coolant hose. And this is where it will go. Next step is to put the bracket on. So I got it in position now, and it is not really that tricky. My issue here is that I have a camera in the way. But from here I just bolt this on, and then I bolt the other bracket on, and I put the steering stabilizer on. So let's put the bottom bolt and brick there. And the top one as well. From here, you just need to attach them and they go on there with a 7mm. You are better off doing this a little bit in the top and a little bit in the bottom, moving them around so you get them tightened down evenly. Okay, so that is hard enough, and now it is in position. So this is where we got it. It's sandwiched in between the frame with the bolts. Up over there we have the coolant hose, but this one has an extra layer of rubber protecting it, so I'm not worried about this one being here. And now the next step is to tighten this one down. But before I do that, I'm going to put the shock in position over here so that we see where this one has to be. And then I'm going to tighten this one down with the shock a little bit in position, and then I'm going to finish up by tightening everything up. It's time to install the damper. And I'm going to put the damping side upwards. It doesn't really matter, but my decision, the reason why I'm doing this is because it got better protection in the top than it got in the bottom. The attachment of this one is quite straightforward. Put the spacer there, then you put the bushing, and then you're attaching it onto the bracket, and you put the bushing from the outside like this, and the spacer, and then you tighten this one down. The bushing look different on each side. My recommendation and the way to do it is to get this side into the hole on the bracket. That will make it more stable if it fits in there, and it will stay there by itself. So keep in mind which side you're putting where. And also this side goes much better onto the spacer. It's not a bad idea to put some grease on this one and on the bushing itself. It will both protect the bushing and it will make it a little bit more quiet. The kind of grease you should use on it should be a silicone-based grease that are okay to use on rubber. I'm using this kind of grease that is made for the brakes and the brake piston especially. I have very good experience with this, so I use that on a lot of different applications. So it goes on like this, put a little bit on this one, down, and let's put some grease on the other bushing as well. And now when I got it greased down, I could just put it on and then I could tighten it just loosely. On it goes, and I tried to wiggle it so it got into the holes, but it's not a big deal if it doesn't, because when you tighten it, it's gonna find it the way. There we go. The next step of the installation is to do this side, and that's the same principle with the bushing and the hardware. You take the hardware from the kit and you put it on the exact same way as you did on the other side. Slide it through the bracket. And attach the hardware there just loosely, because you need to you have to adjust this one so it's got a good location. And now what you need to do is to extend the damper a little bit. I think I'm gonna extend it maybe this much, so out here, and this could be a little bit hard or not, so that's where I'm gonna put it. When you're putting this one on, you don't want to limit the travel of it, because you need to be able to turn both of your tires in both directions as much as you can. So I'm gonna put it here as it is. It's a little bit extended, and I just realized that I didn't put the booth on, but honestly it's not necessary. It's not necessary to have the booth on, but and it's also quite easy to put the booth on afterwards. So just undo this bolt and put the booth on. But now I'm gonna tighten these ones down. The principle here is the same. Don't go too loose, don't go too hard, and get it tightened down evenly. So that's a rough one, and as I see now here in this area, there's no room for it to move. It's leaning on the steering rod, so I need to adjust it more upwards and tighten it down. Now it looks much better. You have the clearance in between here, and if you're moving the tires, all the way to the left, you should have a gap here. So if you don't, that's gonna means that your steering will be limited. And same goes on the other side. You should be able to turn it all the way out. It's extended all the way to the right, and I have all the space I need here. It's not the steering stabilizer that stopped me from turning more. And let's try it on the other side. And that's all the way extended. And I just got that clearance just exactly. So that means the position I put it in is just spot on. The only thing left is to tighten this one down so it's snug and it fits hard. And when I'm doing this, I'm doing that equally on both sides. You could look on the amount of tread you had out. Make sure that you have the same amount on the top as in the bottom. I'm just gonna put these ones on here pretty tight, but not over tighten them. There's probably a torque spec to this one as well, but since there's no instructions, it's hard to know. What's left now is to tighten this one down. And when I'm doing this, I want the bushings to be a little bit compressed, but you should not overdo it. Booth just goes on. Just has to be on there. You could adjust it more later. Back with the bushing. and pull it through. This one can sometimes be a little bit tricky since the shock is moving. And you see the interior here is moving around, but there is a small edge here that you could hold on to. A trick for this is to use some sort of impact or to hold this down with some sort of tool. But if you have a fast enough tool, that generally makes the work on the highest speed. That made it compress the bushings a little bit, just enough for it to be here nicely. Now we have to see if we could do the same way on the opposite side. If I remove the tire, there's a lot of space there. And now we have perfect access to this one, and also a really good angle for you to see how I did it. So this is the final nut, and I reach it without any issues. I'm gonna go with full speed here because speed is the key here. And now we got it compressed a little bit, just enough. You should not do this too much. And before I'm finishing off everything, I'm gonna make sure that this one that goes out here, that it doesn't hit my tires or anything like that. This is not really hard. It's just a little bit tricky at some parts, but definitely manageable without any bigger issues. You don't really need to put the vehicle on jacks to do it, but I would recommend you to do that because you have better clearance and you could also moving the tires and make sure that the steering stabilizer doesn't stop the movements of your steering in any way. The last thing is basically to put the booth on, and this one goes over like this. Take the zip tie that came with the kit and zip tie this down so it stays in position. I made a final check of everything. I checked the bolts, that they are tight. I checked the steering, that it works well. And everything when it comes to the installation is done and it looks really good. The red booth was really nice. It's an overall a very nice kit from Umeå Offroad. You should definitely check out Umeå Offroad. Link will be in the description. It's a really cool store. They sell a lot of off-road stuffs. It's a Swedish store and they are super cool. And the only thing that remains now is to test it, to try it out and to see if there is an actually difference, because that's what matters. Good morning, everyone. This morning we're driving the Jimny and I had been driving it for a while with the steering stabilizer that I installed, and I kind of starting to get a sense on how it feels with the steering stabilizer installed, and I must say it was totally worth the money. It changed the characteristic of the vehicle in a way that I really like. It was not the kind of change that was like day and night change. It was more subtle changes, but really pleasant and noticeable subtle changes. For example, now we are cruising along on a highway and I'm driving at about 100k or 60 miles per hour, and previously when I did this I would always have two hands on the steering wheel. At this point I could relax a little bit more when I'm driving and just cruise along, but you should keep in mind that a steering stabilizer is not fixing any issues that you might have with your steering. For an example, when I got this Jimny from the beginning, it was lifted with 3-inch, and it was still on stock control arm bushings. The result of that was that it was like walking on its toes. So every time I hit the pothole or hit higher speeds, it was like twisting around. Installing angle correction bushings in the front control arms kind of fixed that a little bit and made it much better. But I guess you could say that the steering stabilizer was the dot above the I in that situation. It kind of stabilized the whole thing and made it track straight. It removed some of those twisty movements and behavior that you could got, and also removed some of that side play that you have sometimes when you're driving vehicles like that. There's still a little bit side play because that's just natural, but it's not as it was before. And so I'm really glad that I installed the steering stabilizer, and the Jimny is finally starting to feel like a car that you could take on a longer drive, and not being that terrified of driving it. Now I kind of done most of the basic things that I wanted to do on this Jimny. I got it inspection. I got it through the inspection. I fixed the steering. I swapped out the clutch, and I swapped out the ABS sensors. So at the moment the Jimny is ready to go, and from this moment on, this is kind of where the fun stuffs begin. Now I could start to think about and I also fixed a head gasket that was not sealed correctly, and from now on the fun stuffs with this Jimny starting. Well, I still have some minor things to fix. I have some axle seals that are like a little bit leaky that I want to take care of, and I have an oil pan gasket that is also leaking a little bit that I want to fix. And if you want to see those stuffs and continue to see what I'm going to do with this Jimny, I would be very glad if you're subscribing and click that bell to get notifications when I release new videos. And this is the first video I release since I reached 1,000 subscribers. And to all of you who subscribe and to all of you who are watching my content, I want to reach out to you and say thank you. It means a lot for me that you're subscribing, and it gives me better possibilities to continue to produce this kind of content for you. And if there's something special you want to see, let me know that down in the comment. Thanks for watching, and I see you later.